Reverend Stephen Herman has been a member here in Cassadaga for many decades. He holds credentials as an ordained minister, certified medium, and teacher with the National Spiritualist Association of Churches in the USA, and has taught for the International Spiritualist Federation in the United Kingdom. With more than 40 years of study and practice, Stephen has gained a worldwide following, and he is also the best-selling author of 3 books: Mediumship Mastery, The Mechanics of Receiving Spirit Communications; Mediumship Mastery 2, Advanced Techniques at Work and Spiritual Mediumship, A Medium's Adventures with the Spirit World. All 3 books should be available in our bookstore. Please help me in welcoming to the platform Reverend Stephen Herman.
So good morning. I'm really happy to be here. How many of you are happy to be here? Are you all excited? Now what's going to happen if there's suddenly the asteroid's coming and it hits Spirit Pond? Where do you think we're all going to be? We're going to be in the spirit world. And how many of you are prepared for that? Now it's interesting because all of us have people who we know, some of them we might not even like, and they kick the bucket. And then you go to Cassadaga, and what happens? They may or may not come through. How many of you have consulted with a medium? You might have even made an appointment. Or you drove to Cassadaga, you went into the Welcome Center, where the bookstore is, you looked at the board, and all this messy writing and magic markers. Oh, I'll go to this person. You call them up, and then you go in for the session, and you desperately want to hear from your mother. And who do you think comes through? Some aunt, and you hated her guts. Or you have your 4th husband come through, and you only want to hear from your 2nd one. So the spirit people are around us, but it's not always the people who we'd expect. And when you get into this, you investigate it, which is a good thing. You test the medium. Do any of you test mediums? You know, they used to stick mediums in potato sacks and stick needles into them to measure the depth of the altered state that they would be in. And they'd set up all these ways to make sure there was no trickery. And then you test the spirit world too. But what's interesting is the spirit world will test each of us. They will give you information in some cases that you don't have a clue about what the medium is talking about. And then you go home, you speak to your spouse, or you talk to your mom or dad or some older relative, and they confirm, they validate the information. So you go to this, you can be kind of on the fence, you're not sure what it is, if it actually exists, just because you've watched all the stuff on TV and you think it's a bit hokey, and you're right, it is. So you go in here, and there's a skepticism, which is very good. But the world of spirit, it's not in some far-off place, is it? Where is it? It's around us. And we're all going to go there at some point, and so all your loved ones, they will come through with information as you are very inquisitive and get into this. And they'll completely alter your mindset in a good way. Isn't that a good thing? Have any of you had that happen? You're skeptical. You hide in the back. You're wearing sunglasses. And what's going to happen? The medium's going to go to you, aren't they? This is what happens. And it's not always the individual who you'd expect to come through. So spiritualism is not about some type of blind faith or dogmatic adherence to some sectarian theology. And of course, sometimes people, that's the way they're brought up. They get involved with whatever religion, and it's like being in a box. But when you come and get involved in spiritualism as it's presented here in Cassadaga, there's an encouragement to use your common sense. Don't just believe something because some medium tells you. They might be literally deluded. And that can happen because there's a fine line between being psychic and psychotic. And you go to a medium, they tell you these things, but you want to investigate it. Because what you're doing right now with your investigation of spiritualism, your involvement, some of you may work with the healing or the mediumship, or you're sitting in development classes. All of that is going to give you an awareness of who you are. It's going to give you an understanding, not just in theory, because you read it in a book or some clergy tells you this from the pulpit, but an actual understanding that there's something more than just the physical. And when you talk to a loved one in the spirit dimension, they can tell you all these things about themselves so you can identify them, so you can recognize them. But they can also tell you what they've been up to. Do you think that they spy on you or stalk you? Has anyone had a feeling that there's someone looking over your shoulder, or you're driving the vehicle and you can feel the hands of the Spirit over your hands as you're driving? Why? Because you're not very good at driving. Maybe you're thinking about stuff, and it's, so the driving's a bit disharmonious. So they'll try, they can't control us completely, but they can influence you. And as we develop an awareness of self, we're going to start, hopefully, working on ourselves and growing. So the work that we do here in this physical life, it's going to greatly matter once you kick the bucket and you go into the world of the Spirit. And I tell you, the grandmother that you knew and loved, or maybe you didn't love her for whatever reason, she's still the same person, and yet she goes to the spirit world. She's exposed to people who are higher teachers. She's exposed, if she needs some balancing and harmony brought to her mind, there's therapists, there's healers there. And she's going to be able to talk about that, where she's at, and even reflect back on her life, on things that she just didn't do that well, and be able to influence you. Now, there's a lot of people in this material world, and they don't believe in this. They might be a complete atheist. The spirit world will still influence those people. But what's wonderful about spiritualism, you're not going to get it really anywhere else, is you can go here, you can commune with the world of spirit. It's all science. So every communication that takes place, the energy has to be there, the conditions have to be there. What kind of individual in the spirit world do you think would be a good communicator? How many of you know? You've got someone who's really extroverted. How many of you would like to come up here and just talk to everyone? Now, some of you it would be a piece of cake. You'd be able to get up here, you're extroverted, right? You're outgoing, your energy field is it just easily expands. But then there's some people, they're just shy, right? They're reserved. And it's not that someone who's shy and reserved can't come through, but if you've noticed, often, if you go to a medium, the strongest communicator is going to be someone who has that kind of energy. And usually, depending on the length of the session, you're going to have other individuals kind of piggyback off of their energy. So if you start to develop your own psychic ability, your own awareness of the spirit world, when you go to the world of the spirit, because you've been involved in it here in this physical life, you're going to have a much better ability to be able to come through. There are classes in the spirit world, believe it or not, on this. Just like there's classes here, how to communicate, how to develop, unfold your mediumistic abilities. And I can think of often, I'll be doing a session, and I've got my client, sitting right in front of me. They're physically there. And I can feel clairvoyantly, I can sense and see in my peripheral vision. I'll be aware of an individual just sitting there, observing what's taking place. Now, that individual, there's nobody who's working with me. That individual has absolutely nothing to do with the person, not related to the individual I'm working with. And I'm aware that that person who's watching is learning, they're observing and they're learning about the process. Why? Because one of their loved ones is going to be consulting a medium and they're going to come through. And they'll even talk about this when they come through. They'll say, I spent all this time studying and working on it. Now, if your loved one really can relate to the medium, do you think it's going to be easy for them to come through? Just like, we meet people in this physical life, we're on the same page as them. And there's some people, the wheels fall off your vehicle, your car. You go to the used car shop. You shake the guy's hand, And there's this sleazy kind of energy, dishonest energy around them. So you're going to meet people, the chemistry isn't right. Why? Because thoughts are things. Our physical bodies, as dense as they are, their vibration. Everything in this material world is a heavier vibration compared to those in the spirit. So when we have two or more gathered for the focus of communing with God and the angel world, we have this power that's present. So someone in the spirit world, if they really particularly resonate with a medium, you're going to get very good communication from them. Let's say your mom really relates to a particular medium here in Casadega. You go to 10 mediums here, and maybe they all bring your mom through, because she'll come through however she can do it. But there'll be certain mediums that are very, very good at bringing through certain individuals. But you get some people in the spirit world, let's say that they're a performer. I remember one of my friends, she's passed over to the spirit world. I mean, she moved from Wyoming to Washington, D.C. in 1945, right after the Second World War, and started working for the State Department. And actually, it's really quite neat. I remember going to her place. She lived in the Watergate Hotel. Remember Watergate? Well, she lived there. Remember, she's into astrology, and she'd do readings. She was part of the Church of Two Worlds, which is in Georgetown. So she was out in Las Vegas one year doing readings. How many of you have been to Las Vegas? You walk down the strip, and So it's got this kind of showy type of energy. And she had different people coming to her for sessions. This is going way back in the 70s, around 1980, about that time. And she had this one guy come for a session. And this individual, there's one man from the spirit world came through. And as she's speaking to this guy, the spirit, because they come in very, very, very close, right? Our energy field expands. And they'll blend their vibration. They'll blend their mind with the mind of the medium. And she was describing the spirit and what he was saying. And she found herself stammering and stuttering. How many of you have a speech impediment? And she's talking this way. And she's conscious of what's going on. She's still very aware. And she's looking at the gentleman sitting right in front of her. He's white as a ghost. Now, the individual, and she didn't know any of this, the individual coming through from the world of the spirit was Elvis Presley. The gentleman who she was doing the session for was his manager, which she didn't know. Now, someone like Elvis, what did he do with his life? He spent it performing, didn't he? He was on TV, in front of audiences of thousands. Now, you can just imagine someone like that on a mental level has a very, very, very developed vibration that's conducive for this. We go to a meeting like this. It's not just one of us meditating or one of us putting out the energy. It's a group type of effort. And that increased vibration enables the loved ones to come very, 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 very close. Sometimes we see people, they want to change their thoughts. How many of you have negative thoughts? And that's human to have negative thoughts. I mean, some people take medications. It's that severe. They go to their physician, I'm depressed, or I get angry a lot, and they get all these medications, which maybe seemingly helps. But because thoughts are things that we're constantly putting out. We see sometimes people, they may say affirmations, right, like a positive type of statement. And when they do that, it totally reprograms the unconscious mind, right, with different thinking that's constructive. However, the thoughts they're putting out change their energy field completely. How many of you see auras? I mentioned like a used car dealer who's dishonest, right? They're unethical. You don't have to see the darkness around someone like that, because you can be aware, right? Just the sensing of it. All of you are clairsentient, right? You can feel the energies around you. And really, if you get into the development, you're going to start to be able to see things, and you don't need glasses, because your third eye, your innate, subtle ability to see things. How many of you have traveled out of your body? We have the subtle body, right? It interpenetrates the physical. And sometimes when someone first gets into this, they have these dreams that they're psychic, they're vivid dreams that take place while they're asleep, which is very, very, very different from like a regular unconscious dream. If you've eaten too much pizza at midnight and then you go to sleep, and they see loved ones. But often your guides will literally take you into excursions into the spirit world. Now this is almost like sleepwalking, because when it's happening, it's like a dream. I guess sometimes people talk about lucid dreaming, and that's where you're very aware, you can control kind of what's going on during the dreams. And this is similar. There's an awareness of what's taking place, but at the same time, you're completely asleep. So they'll start to open people up, because people can read something in a book, they can have some religious authority tell them, oh, there's life after death, you have to believe this, and if you follow this, you're going to go to the right place. How many times, those of you who are mediums, have you had someone come to you who had a relative that, let's just say they were like a fundamentalist Orthodox Christian, come through from the world of the spirit and relate to the individual you're working with, how it was completely different than they expected, how they encountered individuals in the spirit world they didn't think would be there. Because you have to believe this, and everyone else, well, they're going to go to another place. The spirit world wants to communicate with us and wants to work with us. We think about our auras and the colors that are there in the energy fields. And if you're really working on yourself spiritually, there's this potency to your energetic fields. There's this illumination. It's a brightness that's observed from the higher realms of the spirit world. We have the healing going on. If any of you were to tune into what's taking place while they're channeling the healing, it's not just the healer standing there moving their arms around and the individual sitting there. There's energy around that, and you'll see the light that's going in, which may be different colors. And you may also be aware of the individuals who are assisting from the spirit world. We think about the angel healers, the spirit physicians that work. I remember one time I used to work, I operated this healing center for many years in Massachusetts. And one of my students, she was just watching it as I was working. And she saw this Native American, like full headdress, and he was like moving around through the energy field as I was working. Had some type of wand, and he was shaking it around. Now, it wasn't like she was trying to tune in, but they allowed her to see that, to demonstrate things to her. All of this is not scary. You come to this, oh my God, can you imagine if I'm standing up here, my head turns around, and all this green stuff starts coming, and I start swearing in Latin? How many of you would stick here? No, you wouldn't. So the people who we know and love in the spirit, they haven't changed much, and if they have, they've overcome their addictions. They've worked through tendencies that weren't the highest when they're here. And no matter where you are in your physical plane life, and you may be very stuck, you may feel very despondent. I had this one young man, must be at least 30 years ago, he came for a session, and he says, before you do the session, I want you to read this letter. And he had like a 6-page letter in an envelope. Now, I just didn't want to know anything about anyone I'm working with. So I just started, I did a prayer and I started working. And after about 15 minutes, he stopped me again. He was very insistent, so I read the letter. And the first page or two was all about how despondent, depressed, just negative, everything going bad in his life. And it continued. And the next 2 pages described in graphic detail all the different ways, methods, approaches that in the past he had attempted to take his life. Can you imagine that? And I'm reading this, and it goes on the next 2 pages, and it's more of the same, all these different approaches to taking one's life. In terms of making a choice in the present. And I get to the very end, and he's saying how he's not going to do anything till after he consults with me in terms of what the spirits tell him. And of course, as a medium, we can't do things beyond the scope of our practice, can we? In an ethical type of sense. But you see, the spirit world will bring people like that. They'll work with people like that. And all the bad thinking, right? They'll do their best to remove that and actually help that person and bring them the light of God. Each one of us has the gifts of the Spirit. What did the Master Jesus teach? Greater things than I you can do. So if you're new to Cassadaga and it's not scary, what do you want to do? You want to come back here, don't you? How many of you have never been here before? There's a few people who raised their hand. So you want to come back. And if you've got family or friends, bring them here. And this church it's such a good place. The energy here. You just sit here. I mean, you might not even get a message from the medium, but your mind starts to be receptive. Your guides and your loved ones, they can put the thoughts into your head. You're not even aware that you're getting them. I talk about them being very extrovert. Let's say they're a performer, where some of your loved ones might have had really strong personalities, even in a way that's not so good. But that strong will and energy can enable them to influence you very, very easily. Each one of you is blessed, and each one of you is an eternal spirit soul. So spiritualism is wonderful for what it is. And whenever I work here, it's like kind of like one of my homes. It is such a wonderful blessing. So I want to encourage all of you with your growth. If you're into this already, you want to stay with it and get into it even more. And those of you who are new, take what's here. Involve yourself with what's here, because it's only going to benefit you and enable you to learn and grow, which would greatly help you in this present life as well as when we make the transition to the world of spirit. So may God bless each and every one of you.